So right now I'm in about the approximate location of where Abraham Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address. I can't remember if it was right here or if it was down there a little bit, but hey, we're in the approximate spot. Okay, give me the benefit of the doubt. So as many yins know, I am not a huge fan of Abraham Lincoln based on political reasons, as I already mentioned in my previous videos. But to give a little bit of specifics and to talk a little bit about the Gettysburg Address, November 19th, 1863, I wanted to read something because Abraham Lincoln wrote this, and I think that it is a very important thing that we must remember here when we visit Gettysburg battlefield and what it represents to us as the living. When we walk on this battlefield for centuries after the battle, we must remember this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, no long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. And to me, that is an absolutely amazing statement. And for a man that I don't really like as a politician, I'm not a big fan of Abraham Lincoln because like as many yins know, I'm a Northern Copperhead Democrat of the 1860s. But I feel that was spot on because, you know, what I say here, what I do here, what you do here, what we all do here as the living post-battle, our words don't matter in the end. His words, that Gettysburg Address, doesn't matter. What matters is the fallen, the men that were wounded, that died, that fought and struggled here for 3 days. I mean, what people don't understand is that this is hallowed ground. This is, when he dedicated this National Soldier Cemetery, this was hallowed ground. And this is where these men would be laid to rest after fighting one of the greatest, the most greatest battle of the Civil War. It was just famous around the country. This was the most prominent, most important battle of the Civil War. And we as the living, it is our duty to never forget what they did here. And that is why I'm up here, and that is why I do these videos, because I'm not going to take it for granted. I'm not going to say, well, I don't care. That's not what this is. This place is a place that you have to visit and you have to absorb everything and suck it in, because if you don't fully understand what this battlefield represents, if you don't understand what the men did up here, what they went through and endured for 3 days, the struggle on both sides, north and south, if you don't understand it, then you do not understand the true definition of the Battle of Gettysburg. You don't understand it. But we as the living must do everything in our power to honor and remember what these men did here. And that is what Abraham Lincoln meant in the Gettysburg Address. But anyway, peace. Hey everybody, so this right here is the famous Henry Culp, who was the owner of Culp's Hill, going that direction during the Battle of Gettysburg. And if you walk through Evergreen Cemetery, you'll notice the famous names of the locations of where the engagements or skirmishes or battles per se happened. And Henry Culp, as yins might not know, was the uncle of Wesley Culp. And Wesley Culp was from Gettysburg, and before the Battle of Gettysburg, he moved with his, let's just say his manager or his boss down to Virginia. And Wesley Culp enlisted in the 2nd Virginia Infantry Regiment and served in the Confederate Army. But when the Army of Northern Virginia came up to Gettysburg, Wesley Culp had a homecoming. He was coming back to his place of birth and residence. And so when he came to Gettysburg, he asked his commander, he said, "Sir, can I have, do I have permission to come visit my family because I haven't seen them in 2 years?" And he said, "Sure, yeah." So Wesley Culp went and visited his family members, and he said, "You know, I'm only here temporarily. I got permission to visit my family." And they said, "Yeah, sure, you can, you know, are you going to stay?" And he's like, "You know, I can't stay forever. I have to go back to the lines." And for many people that don't know, there's a myth that Wesley Culp died on Culp's Hill, which Henry Culp owned, and that is not true. Wesley Culp died in another location. I'm not sure on the specifics of where he died, but it is pretty tragic and ironic that he would die in his hometown of Gettysburg as a Confederate soldier. And that is the tragedy and the irony of the Civil War that we must reflect on and we must understand. But I thought it was very interesting to walk around the cemetery and talk about those coincidences and those, let's just say, things. When you walk around the cemetery, you see Culp and you see Spangler and you see a bunch of these prominent names of Gettysburg, because many of these people owned these lands and these properties around the battlefield, and many people don't realize that these were people's farmlands. Like Henry Culp, that was his land, and now in 2025 we see it as, oh, that's just Culp's Hill, but this is the man that owned Culp's Hill during the Battle of Gettysburg. But anyway, thank you for watching this, and peace. So right now I'm up here in the National Soldier Cemetery up on Cemetery Hill, and right here we have Captain Hubert Dilger's battery right here. Battery 1, 1st Ohio Artillery, 6 12-pounders. I talked about them yesterday at the north end of the town, or of the battlefield. Hubert Dilger was part of the Union 11th Corps Artillery. And during the Battle of Gettysburg on the third day, up here on this hill, Union soldiers of the 11th Corps were posted up here. And while Colonel Alexander of the Army of Northern Virginia, during the famous artillery bombardment up on the Confederate line over on the south side of the town, what the purpose of it was that Colonel Alexander was then ordered by General Robert E. Lee to bombard Cemetery Hill, not just Cemetery Hill, but the whole Union line spanning from Cemetery Hill all the way down Cemetery Ridge. Not so much basically firing upon, specific targets. Like, he just didn't say, well, just fire upon the copse of trees up on Cemetery Ridge, but he also wanted to demoralize and basically disorganize the Union force, the Army of the Potomac, up here on Cemetery Hill, going down the fishhook on Cemetery Ridge. But as you can see, all of this foliage right here spanning out, to the best of my knowledge, none of this was here. This was open land during the time of the battle. The cemetery was placed after the war, dedicated to the soldiers, to bury the soldiers after the Civil War. And so during that artillery bombardment, that famous artillery bombardment by Colonel Alexander on the Confederate lines over on the other side of the field, artillery shells were exploding all over the place. There was carnage all over the place. And up in the cemetery up there, the Evergreen Cemetery where I was, my fourth great-grandfather and his comrades actually had to duck and cover and hide behind gravestones or boulders or anything they could find, because for a couple hours this artillery bombardment was huge and it was constant. The Confederates wanted, like I said, to demoralize and disorganize and basically soften up the Union force. But sadly, sadly in the case of the Confederates, but fortunately in the case of the Union, the Confederates mostly overshot their targets, and a lot of the projectiles went above their approximate locations, and that's why many of the shells up here on Cemetery Hill, yes, they met their locations here, they hit their targets, but a lot of them went overhead, hitting the gravestones in the cemetery in Evergreen, but then also going around the hill to the other side, going near the wounded and hitting the caissons, the horses. And it was absolute carnage up here on July 3rd, 1863. Many people don't understand that bombardment was so loud and so prominent that you could hear it from Harrisburg. There are some sources that say you could hear it all the way to Pittsburgh, which is very interesting. And it was so loud. But it was one of the biggest artillery bombardments, the first, and I would say the biggest on North American soil. And General Robert E. Lee commanded that before he would send the Longstreet's Corps, basically Pickett's division, Pettigrew and Trimble, and he would send them across the field on the infamous, or not the infamous, but the famous Pickett's Charge, Pickett's, Pettigrew, Trimble Charge, on July 3rd, 1863, which I will be talking about over there. But for right now, I'm going to be talking about my fourth great grandfather, where his Kameraden were placed on Cemetery Hill right now. So this right here is the right flank marker of the 74th Pennsylvania. This is where my fourth great grandfather and his Deutsche Kameraden, this is where they would be, or Soldaten, this is where they would be placed on, this is West Cemetery Hill. This is where they would be placed after they retreated back through the town on July 1st, 1863, and they would be primarily placed here July 2nd and July 3rd, 1863. And the reason why this hill, that Cemetery Hill, is so prominent, and many people don't know this, but the prominence and the importance of Cemetery Hill is that this was the fallback position for the Army of the Potomac, for the 1st and 11th Corps in the late afternoon of July 1st. Now, Adolf von Steinwehr's division of the 11th Corps was placed here on purpose to basically start entrenching and start the defenses, start building and preparing the defenses, because, you know, even though I don't like the commander of the 11th Corps, General Oliver Otis Howard, I will say that it was very ingenious and very smart of him that he would be able to anticipate the Union Army's retreat. But that was probably because after the Battle of Chancellorsville, he knew, because of those mistakes and those mishaps of that catastrophic retreat, when Jackson's Corps basically flanked the Union Army, specifically the Union Army's 11th Corps, the Army of the Potomac. When he flanked them in Chancellorsville, it was a very catastrophic and disorganized retreat in Chancellorsville. So I believe that General Howard learned from his mistakes, which they were undoubtedly blamed upon the Flying Dutchmen, aka the Germans, of course, the scapegoats, the foreigners. And so here, this was the fallback position for the Army of the Potomac, and this is where the Union Army would stage its defense. So when Ewell's Corps ran up through the town pursuing, Ewell and Hill, when they pursued the Army of the Potomac through the town, which I will go into further detail once I get back into the town. For now, I'm going to the south side of the battlefield. When they were pursuing them, General Ewell was told by General Lee, take the hill if practicable. Now, there's many things that historians could debate on. They could say, well, what does practicable mean? Does that mean take the hill, don't take the hill? But what the circumstances are is many people blame General Ewell and say, well, General Ewell didn't do his job and General Ewell could have taken that hill. No, he couldn't have taken this hill, and General Ewell knew it. Number one, his troops were absolutely exhausted. Number two, the defenses up here were already being prepared by Steinwehr's division, and the 11th Corps especially was already placing themselves in a defensive position. And number three, General Ewell did not know what was over this hill. He didn't know what was on the other side of Cemetery Hill, so he could not attack this hill and take this hill because he was unsure, and he knew that his soldiers were so exhausted that he wasn't willing to take the chance and gamble he wasn't willing to take the chance and gamble the battle. He might have been able to take this hill, might not have, who knows? It's up in the air. It's a mystery. But what we do know is he didn't take this hill, And that is why the Army of the Potomac was able to start the fish hook at the other side of the hill and extend it all the way down this way, going down Cemetery Ridge. And that is why I'm going to be going now south on the battlefield, going down Cemetery Ridge to talk further about the other aspects of the Battle of Gettysburg.